Welcome to Stab the Dragon Productions for episode number 196, sort of, give or take. It is January 22nd, 2025, and we are here today to celebrate the inauguration of President Donald J. Trump as America's 47th president, 45 and 47. And to do so, I will be sipping and reviewing Rider Bull Moose Rye whiskey, a suitably patriotic and even presidential whiskey. I've previously reviewed Rough Rider Bourbon on Veterans Day of 2022, but now we're going to look at the rye. So we're mixing a little bit of politics with a whiskey review, I suppose, but I do think that celebrating the inauguration of President Trump is definitely worth doing. Seems like a new morning in America. There we go. Now let's talk about the whiskey. Just the facts. This whiskey comes to us from Long Island Spirits, New York, and is thrice barreled, according to the label, in New American Oak, used bourbon cask, and used single malt cask. This is made from rye and malted barley. The Bull Moose comes in at 45% ABV or 90 proof. And here in Fort Worth, it is available only at Goody Goody for $28.98, and that is a sale price. I got mine at Total Wine about 3 or 4 years ago for about $35, I think, maybe. But nobody's carrying it anymore except Goody Goody, and theirs is kind of on a clearance sales price thing. So I think it's disappearing from Fort Worth liquor stores. Note, this is not labeled as a straight rye. This is just a rye whiskey. So that means it is likely less than 2 years old. Tasting notes. Well, it's spicy. It's got the rye spice, perhaps some leather, tobacco, stone fruits, honey, white pepper, brown sugar, oats, caramel, vanilla. The website actually said blackberry, really, but I didn't get that at all. Pine needles is really what I get. One reviewer said apple pie, maybe. It does have some cinnamon to it, definitely. So a wide variety of tasting notes there. My score was a 91. Letter grade, which emphasizes drinkability, A+. This is really a good rye whiskey. In fact, if you like rye whiskey and you can get this, you must get it. If you, like me, collect military whiskeys, this is a must-buy as well, because the Rough Riders were a military outfit, the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry in 1898, Spanish-American War. Outside of some of my favorite Texas Ryes that are much more expensive than this is going to be a favorite rye, if I can still get it. So I'm giving it my highest recommend. Now, if you aren't a fan of that strong rye spice flavor, stay away, because this is really a pretty heavy dose of pine needles for me. Now, the word smooth is overly used, I know, but this whiskey had no noticeable burn. Now, I like the burn. I like a higher proof whiskey. I like, some burn as long as it's not the nasty ethanol kind of a burn. But this whiskey is smooth. I really didn't get a burn from it. Neat is great, or probably a cocktail, because it's got full flavor going on. This is going to be a great whiskey. Now, for the details. History, 4 to 5 points. But let me first take a sip here. Oh my. This is really good. History, Long Island Spirits of Baiting Hollow, New York. Opened in 2007 and has won several awards along the way. This Bull Moose Rye won several when it came out in 2018. They are the first craft distillery on Long Island since the 1800s. Now that's odd. They use locally sourced grains for their whiskey and link their brand to Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders from the Spanish-American War of 1898. Roosevelt was born in New York, in Manhattan. He's a native New Yorker, and when the Rough Riders got home from the war, they landed in Montauk Point, Long Island. The Rough Rider name comes from the 1st United States Volunteer Cavalry. It was a regiment that was of volunteers that was formed especially for the Spanish-American War in Cuba. Now, this cavalry regiment was not regular army. Back then, they had different rules, and so you could basically raise your own private army there almost. They were raised privately. It was a force of Americans from the Southwest that included some Native Americans, and specifically the Southwest because it was a hot climate, and they knew that Cuba was hot. So while they were raised and trained as cavalry, when they actually went to Cuba, their horses were not shipped over. Oops. So they fought as infantry, most notably at the Battle of San Juan Hill, where Teddy Roosevelt performed so bravely that he was later awarded the Medal of Honor. And that was actually long after he was dead. The Bull Moose name for the rye whiskey comes from Theodore Roosevelt's third campaign for president in the Progressive Party, a third party made up of disaffected Republicans and Democrats formed in 1912. The Progressives got the nickname Bull Moose. So basically, if you study this whiskey, you end up studying a lot of American history, which I see no problem with. I like that idea. This whiskey is a great example of a distillery doing just about everything right. They named their whiskey after a local hero, and they use a grained bottle process. You know, they use Long Island grains and water, and so it's all local. The terroir and history of Long Island is wrapped up in this bottle, and they'll tell you what's in the bottle and how they make it. But again, sadly, it's looking like this whiskey may be disappearing from Fort Worth stores. 5 out of 5, though, for history. 5 points. Bottle, label, and marketing. The bottle is kind of the standard short, squat, round bottle that I'm not really a fan of. Totally unremarkable and boring. The label is nice, but a little bit subdued because of the color there. But you'll notice the rider mounted on his horse carrying a flag. Okay, so it's a Rough Rider, I guess. But this medium brown, and then the print down here is kind of a gold print. And so that makes it very difficult to read. It's a small font and it's gold on brown. So, a lot of the information is lost, and I've got to use a magnifying glass. So let me read the label here. 3-barrel rye whiskey Rough Rider Bull Moose. In 1898, Teddy Roosevelt, a native Long Islander, organized the United States 1st Volunteer Cavalry, known as the Rough Riders. This disparate group of men shared a common purpose, the purpose of the adventure, independence, excellence. Long Island Spirits located just miles from where the Rough Riders disbanded, follows the same beliefs as these men and their leader. It takes more than that to kill a bull moose. Handcrafted, small batch distilled. So the label, marketing, I've not seen any advertisements for it anywhere. You know, they have won their share of awards, but all in all, it's a nice looking package. I've seen no advertising again for, but their website has a link to a news story from Men's Journal, June of 2024, about one of their bourbons. So, all in all, 3 points out of 5 for bottle label and marketing. Appearance of this whiskey: caramel colored, for sure. It's not overly dark, so that's a 3 out of 5. Composition: the Long Island Spirits website says that this whiskey has a 93% Long Island winter rye in the mash bill and 7% malted barley. It's aged in new American oak for at least a year. Then, and this is on the bottle as well, the stuff I'm reading here. It is aged in new American oak for at least a year, then transferred to used bourbon barrels, and finally finished in used single malt barrels from their own distillery. It weighs in at 45% or 90 proof. For remarkable transparency and clarity in their process there, that bumps the score up. But the only problem here is that the bottle, after detailing how it is distilled and aged in 3 barrels, does not say distilled by Long Island Spirits. It says handcrafted and bottled by Long Island Spirits. So I'm left kind of wondering here. I know some of their early stuff was sourced, but I mean, they go to all the trouble to say, hey, we use, Long Island grain, and here's how we do all the aging and barreling stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of think, and I've seen this with other distillers, other bottles, is that there's so much information there that makes you think they distilled it, but then they don't actually put that on the label. So I'm not sure. That leaves me a question. Again, the website says it's grain to bottle, New York. So I think it's all done at their distillery, but I'm not 100% positive. 14 out of 15 points. Nose. On the nose here, I immediately smell the rye spice. Pine needles. What a pleasant smell. With some cinnamon, maybe. Some sweetness. One website said apple pie. I can see that because of the cinnamon and the sweetness and the bready character of it. That's really an impressive nose. Again, if you've watched my other videos, my nose is just messed up, broken, whatever. I can't smell bourbons at all unless they're Texas bourbons and they have the Texas funk. Ryes, most of the time I can smell them. This is an impressive nose, so 9 points out of 10. Well, especially when you go into the glass and you got your mouth open and you breathe in and then you sip. Yeah, you really get that pine needle rye spice note. That's really beautiful. So 9 out of 10 for nose. Taste. Again, I get the rye spice and the pine needles right up front. There's a sweetness, a base of caramel sweetness maybe all throughout, but it's not overly sweet. It's kind of muted, and the spices take over. I think maybe there's hints from the bourbon barrel at mid palate. Maybe some mustiness from the single malt. This is a complex, evolving, surprising rye. And again, there's some people who say apple pie. Perhaps, maybe. This is a superior rye. This is going to match some of my favorite Texas Ryes, but with a totally different flavor profile because it's New York terroir instead of Texas terroir. So, yeah, but this would be on my list of absolute top favorite rye whiskeys. So for taste, 24 out of 25 points. Not many of my whiskeys get that score. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. This rye's got a very good, rich mouthfeel for a 90 proof whiskey. It coats the mouth, which in turn gives it a long finish with a variety of flavors hanging around, particularly the pine needles. Uh, when I say that there's no discernible burn, if you drink it just right, I can get a little burn up in my sinuses, which I love. I like that. Yeah, right there. Got just a little bit. I'm not even sure what I do in my mouth, but if I don't do that just right, then there's no burn at all. Now on the finish, there's mouth tingles. There's no Kentucky hug. The finish is long lasting, letting you know that you just had whiskey, with those tingles, but the rye flavor, the pine needle thing, that continues on. Some of the sweetness continues on. There's nothing negative here at all. This is truly amazing stuff. So for mouthfeel, burn, and finish, 14 out of 15 points. Neat or mixer. I prefer it neat. And at this price point, it would be fantastic as a mixer as well. Now, I have not made a cocktail of this. I don't make many cocktails at the house, but this one, boy, I might give that a try. But I can't see this going wrong in a cocktail. It's got the flavor strong enough. Okay, here's the deal about me and cocktails. If you completely hide the flavor of the whiskey and all you got is the foo-foo stuff in a cocktail, I'm not looking for that. I want something that enhances the flavor, and old fashions are generally speaking good at that, provided that your whiskey that you're using has enough flavor on its own, right? And this one I think does. I think this would be outstanding in an old fashioned. I'm not a huge fan of Manhattans. I've had two or three. Didn't really care for them. Something about the vermouth, maybe. I don't know. But for neater mixer, definitely 5 points, 5 out of 5. Price, value, and availability. Again, sadly, it looks like this whiskey may not be carried in Fort Worth anymore. Goody Goody, again, right now has it on sale for $28.98, and that may be a precursor to getting rid of it. But I know I must have paid $35 for it 3 or 4 years ago at Total Wine, I think. I think I saw it at Specs too, so I'm not sure which place, but I think maybe the bourbon was at both and the rye was only at one or the other. I don't know, but I think I paid mid 30s for this. At that time, for that price, this is clearly it was very well worth it. Definitely. And so right now, Goody Goody having it on sale for less than $30. Oh man. I really thought about going and getting another bottle as a backup, because if this goes away, then oof, that'd be a tragic story. So for a thrice barreled rye from a small craft distillery in New York, fantastic value. 9 out of 10 points. The only point coming off of that's for availability, right? My total score then is a 91. Letter grade, drinkability, A+. Recommendation, if you like rye whiskeys and if you like to collect military whiskeys, this is a must-buy. Outside of some of my favorite Texas Ryes that are much more expensive than this is going to be my favorite rye, I think. So my highest recommend. Now, if you aren't a fan of that strong rye spice flavor, probably stay away, because you do get a heavy dose of pine needles here. The word smooth, again, is overused, but hey, this is smooth. There's very little burn going on here. And I like the burn, and so usually if a whiskey doesn't have the burn, it's like, that's a minus point there. But this is so good, so fantastic that it gets a very high score. And again, the name got my attention because I've studied Teddy Roosevelt a bit, and I remember opening it, sampling it, and immediately knew this was a special whiskey. And then I tucked it away in my cabinet and haven't touched it since. But now, wow, yeah. Well, conclusion. Again, I'm celebrating the inauguration of Donald Trump. And I think that, like Teddy Roosevelt, a huge change agent for the Republican Party and in America, both of these guys. So love him or hate him, change is coming. Cheers. This is Stab the Dragon, out here.